Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. I am in the car again because the house is currently not available to me. So we're reviewing in the car again. Yay. So let's jump right in. Today I'm going to be reviewing volume 1 of Oblivion Rogue by Pap Souleye Fall. So I checked this book out and I wasn't really sure what to expect. I kind of liked the colors on the front and it looked like an interesting premise, so I decided to read it. And I ignored one of the big red flags that I probably should have looked at, and this was just specific to me, so I kind of want to address this right up front. And that is, at the back, it is rated older teen. So I'm very sensitive to any sort of depiction of violence. I don't really like looking at it. Particularly, it just doesn't do it for me. It's not the kind of stuff that's interesting to me. But I decided to check it out and read it anyways because I was interested, and that was something that was kind of a stumbling block with me with this comic, was that it was a little bit more violent than I particularly care to read. That being said, I don't think it's unnecessarily violent, and I think most adults would be perfectly fine reading this. Most teens would be fine perfectly reading this. I'm just incredibly sensitive to depictions of violence, so this was kind of like for me, but I should have known that going in because of the premise of the book. So the premise of this book is there are two groups. That's a very vague way of putting it. Basically, a large portion of the world, and this takes place in futuristic Africa, has been infected by this plague. I don't know if it's loop or L-E-U-P. It is a plague that starts with like these lesions on your body, and then it overtakes you, and it's just slowly destroying humanity. But there's an area where it hasn't taken hold yet, and there's a group that kind of has a cure. Basically, there's a lot of fighting because of this horrific plague that's going through, and yeah, it's humanity's response to the crisis. One group is taking in children who have kind of been affected by the war and raising them to be soldiers, super soldiers of sorts. And this kind of follows our crew of people, particularly one woman. I called her Oumi. It's O-U-M-I. I will put her name down in the description too in case I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Who is affected by this war. She's kind of blamed for it even appearing in her village in the first place. Or not the war, the virus. But she's blamed for the virus appearing in her village in the first place. And she feels like she doesn't have a place in the world. She kind of falls in with this group of people who they're training to be combat soldiers, essentially. And yeah, this book is about her and her experience with that. So I want to focus, now that we've talked about my dislike of this was solely personal. I don't really think it's a bad book. I thought it was a very interesting premise, and I liked a lot of stuff that the author and artist did, so I'm going to talk about that. Just knowing that my low rating of this book solely stems from my personal preference and my personal sensitivity to violence. I like color in this book. The author used a lot of color, and I feel like he used it very creatively. There were just like splashes of it, and I really, really liked it. I thought it was a really creative way to do it. The author could create a lot of like disturbing scenes without needing excessive violence, but by evoking a mood with color and his art, which I thought was really, really well done, and I really liked that as well. And I thought it was just kind of a creative way of doing things. The characters were unique. I'm not going to say likable because they were not all likable, but there's a scene where there's a number of people that you have to keep track of, and I felt like I could keep track of everyone without them just being like character 1, characters 2. You know how sometimes I feel like authors, there's a lot of background characters, so they're just kind of like, oh, this number 1, number 2, number 3, and they don't have a lot of personality. I feel like the author is able to avoid some of that in this, and yeah, I think it really is an enjoyable book to read. It just isn't the correct book for me. That's what I want to say. It's not the correct series for me, but I think if you're interested in the way humanity is approaching a virus in futuristic Africa, this is definitely something that you should check out. I personally was just kind of turned off by the violence, but I'm extraordinarily sensitive to it, so I don't think most other people would have to worry about it being excessively gory or violent, and I think the author does a lot of creative stuff with color in this comic series that is worth checking out. So yeah, that's my review of Oblivion Rogue by Pap Souleye Fall. Well, I can't say I enjoyed it, but I do recommend it because I think most other people would find some enjoyment out of it. It just wasn't the right for me. So I do recommend giving this a try if anything I said sounds interesting. If you have read this series or have any thoughts on it, please let me know down below in the comments. I will say down below in the comments. I'd love to hear it. On that, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.